just kind of set up on the edge, kind of like this.
Boy, this is like getting interrogated.
Freeze!
Well, Rick and I got married very young. I was 18 and he was 20. So I went from living with my parents to living with my husband.
We called her the gypsy missionary because she had different jobs left and right, which were just so uniquely Jenny. And her desire had been to come home to be near family.
You know, I had been hopelessly in love with this man since I was 19. Years later, blessed with these gorgeous children, and you know, we had plans and we had hopes and we had dreams and we had things that we wanted to do. He was very, very fit, 6'4", 220 when he got diagnosed. And after 2 rounds of Florinox, he was 153 pounds.
Well, I became ill, and then a couple of days later, Rick did. So we were both ill at the same time, and it's just like you say so many times, he turned a corner, you know, and someone turned a corner for favorably or not, and I turned one way and he turned the other and got progressively more ill.
She and Lauren and myself, we all contracted COVID around the same time within the same week.
I'm thinking, well, I'm this old, and I've survived this, so I think Jenny's going to pull through this, you know, because she's young, 39 years old, and surely if I've come through this, she's going to also.
It's hard to even describe some days how bad he felt, and he would get up and go coach 3 kids' games. They were old enough to know what was going on, but too young to be able to fully handle it. We were very worried about them. They were upset, and then he told them the same thing. We're gonna fight it, we're gonna win, but the worst thing that can happen to us is that we die and we run to Jesus.
I had many hours of sleeplessness and anxious nights and all those things that accompany someone being in the hospital. But then you add to it not being able to be with them, and that makes a whole nother level of difficulty.
I couldn't go in. They made me stand there, so I had my phone, she had her phone, the glass window, and I would call her on her phone, and she could talk to me through the mask. It was hard, and if it was too hard to talk, she would text me.
He was in the hospice center. It was very important to him that he did not pass away at home. And he had been sleeping for 7 days. He hadn't opened his eyes. So I held his hand and I sang and I talked and I talked and I talked and I talked. Because when I didn't, that was the loudest clock I've ever heard in my entire life. Tick, tick, tick. And we even switched rooms at one point because I was like, I can't live in here with this clock, you know. And it's a terrible reminder that my life with him is ticking away, and I don't hear it.
I remember the moment where she said to me, Mom, is this all there is? Is this how it ends? And of course, your mother's heart is just like, oh, I wish I was there just holding her hand, you know, just because she's by herself. So that night, I just was anxious, and I slept on the couch by the back door, completely clothed, thinking, if they call, I am there. And sure enough, at 6 a.m, they called, and they said her heart had stopped. And so, you know, your own heart kind of stops for a second, and then it's just kind of an adrenaline reaction. Okay, now we're going right now. But then as we drove to the hospital, we could hardly speak. Neither of us, Lauren or I, we could not speak.
I wanted to be the one. I wanted to be the one lying in that bed.
When I went in to see Rick, because I hadn't, been in the same room with him, my oldest son, Daniel, went with me. So we were alone with Rick, and I just put my hands on his chest, and it was so very obvious that he wasn't there anymore. And I kissed his face and immediately just raised my hand and raised my eyes and said, "Thank you, God. Thank you for this man. Thank you for our time together. Thank you for the kind of man he was."
I didn't expect to physically feel pain. I felt like I was put in a vice and tightened and tightened and tightened.
The grief tends to come in waves and hit at moments that you just really do not expect. It can be the smallest things that trigger it.
We'll just be sitting there in the living room, and there'll be some random something that comes up, a phone call or something that we see, and I'll look at him and he'll start crying because we know what the other one's thinking. It's just like, oh, yeah, and then we'll just sit there and cry. Sometimes we don't even say words.
About a month after we buried him, we had a huge hailstorm. Huge. My kids two of them are crying. They're all scared. The dog's flipping out. My car's totaled. My roof's torn up. And I just felt completely ripped to shreds. But I felt like God was telling me, be still. I'm going to make you be still. Be still. Know that I am God. Know that I am going to put all of this back together how I want to put it back together.
That God, in his faithfulness and his love for us, he understands what we're going through because he is a father. He had to watch his only son die in the worst way possible. And then he had to turn his back on him.
There is a hope. There is a hope that is heaven, and there is a life on earth that is in Jesus Christ.
And that's the heart of it, isn't it? That's the crux of everything. Because, John 3:16, just the basics of all, so that no one would perish. That's his heart. We just need to just keep pointing people to Christ. That's the bottom line of everything.
John had been talking about the assurance the whole time. The worst thing that can happen to me is that I run to Jesus. That's the worst thing that can happen to me. And so, we know that, but I think we're kind of on a mission. Like, we want everybody else to know that. John wanted everybody else to know that. He told me straight up when this happened, this is our testimony now.
This is not our home. This is not the end of the story. There is a beginning to the story that is waiting for us. And that is amazing.